Three, two, one. Let's go! We got one. We got one.
One of three.
I gave you a
solo
little
here.
You gave us a little one under the breath.
Yeah.
I felt it more than I heard it.
Yeah.
Well, I was having a sip of my beer.
Let's make sure we just stay right up on these microphones when we're talking. We are Icon Live right now, Tuesday afternoon.
Day's winding down. You can see the people start flooding back in. You
Yep.
know, those mid-lunch naps are finally ending, and they're finally ready to get back to the conference for the happy hour.
Yes. Beer will be served at the Icon Live booth here in a minute. I'm not sure how many minutes, but it will be served. We have Google running, and we have what Skip is calling the Three Musketeers of Icon.
Coining it
Coining it
right here.
We'll start left to right. Let's introduce yourself and what you do for Icon.
So I'm Jerry Meyer. I'm a geomechanicist. I started out in the University of Adelaide, did a PhD in geomechanics. Then I set up my own consultancy, which got bought out by Icon about 7 years ago.
So you've been with Icon for 7 years?
Yep.
Alex Edwards. I'm a geopressure specialist. I started off, did a degree in geology, did a master's in geology, did a PhD in geomechanics.
Wow.
And then I've basically been at Icon for 10 years.
10 years at Icon, okay. Sir?
I'm Jeremy Gallup, and I've done a PhD in geophysics, and then I worked as an operator within Canada for about 10 years, and then Synovus, and then came to Icon, just been here about 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Been on both sides.
Yeah.
Operating,
Yeah.
service,
Well, and then academia as
highly
well.
educated.
Yeah. Way more educated than we are.
Right. We are clearly outperformed on this stage. However, we do understand the basics of what we're trying to do and putting fracks into rocks at 10,000 feet in the subsurface to get as much hydrocarbon back as possible, as fast as possible, flatten out decline curves, right? Increase recovery factors. That's what we're all about. You guys are not only highly decorated from academia, but now you have healthy careers, long careers on the service side, operating side, and you guys are truly on the front lines of taking that data, the physical measurements, turning it into data, putting it into software, making decisions, and helping people make decisions. What's more exciting? Being on the service side or just the front lines of PhD and research and trying to think of something new, and when you were doing like, what's going on?
Oh, look, for me, being on the front lines with your customers, actually finding problems to solve that are really going to make a difference. And sure, you want to bring the technology to actually do that, but actually understanding your customers, what their problems really are,
There we go.
and then trying to solve those problems for them.
Right?
Adding value, man, that's what it's all about.
So
Right.
that actual application. So all that experience, all that research that you've done, finally applying it and making it work and seeing those results.
Exactly. Turning it into something real.
What has been the biggest leaps in your career so far from our ability to measure the rock to provide us with solutions in the geomechanic realm? What has grown the most? What has advanced the most since the beginning to now?
So this one I'm going to throw a bit to Jeremy, or Jezza as I like to call him.
What is it?
Jezza.
These names are coming out of nowhere. I can't copy that.
The mic is passing over to Jezza.
So we started off like 1D, so it's all well-based geomechanics, and that was sort of well planning. That was a traditional space. But with the improvement in seismic inversion and being able to build 3D models and actually look away from the well, extrapolate further out,
Right.
get a much better idea pre-drill based off the seismic. And that's the sort of stuff that Jeremy does.
Yeah, no, I think
Jezza.
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 we definitely saw that, right?
Dr. Jezza?
Dr. Jezza, I guess that works too. Yeah, just Dr. J. Dr. J. But no, we definitely saw that starting at Icon. We'd kind of do certain types of inversions.
Put a little closer.
And we brought out the Gi-Fi, and we sort of were a little hesitant at the beginning. We're like, what's this going to actually do for us? And when we started, it was really developed for the offshore, and we started bringing it onshore and putting in the facies, and we were starting to bring out things that people were really interested in imaging on the onshore. And so this was a step change, and I think you've seen a lot of people mimicking it now in industry. If you look around the floor and look at competitors, there actually a lot of them are doing the exact same thing that we've been doing for the last 5 years here.
So, in your opinion, what are the benefits of Gi-Fi opposed to, let's say, a model-based inversion?
Well, I think the way they've coded it is actually it's a really hard mathematical problem to solve, and so we've had James Gunning here this week, and so he's been really great, and he's the one who sort of said, I got an algorithm that can tackle this type of distribution. And the thing about it is the prior, like the way you do your spatial continuity constraints, I think it's something that people have been using for a while to clean images. So you'll see a lot of electrical engineers and stuff working on image processing, and then they've actually brought that into the geophysical inversion, and we're seeing it actually performing well. And so we gave a talk this morning on 4D images, looking at, this is in the conventional side, just looking at the imaging in the 4D sense, and it was cleaning up a lot of noise and actually bringing out these things that we knew were right there along horizontals. And so I'd credit James with actually seeing that as kind of something that's
So really actually
different.
bringing out what is actually real, what is actually geologic, opposed to what is that just some funky thing in the data
Is that
processing
noise?
error? Yeah.
Is that real? And so two things, you'd put in the parameters as geology up front, so you know you're going to get something real, and then that feeds right back to Jerry, because he'll be asking for geomechanical parameters, and if one of ours is kind of a little funky because it's a bit noisy, then his won't make any sense, and he'll have to rebuild it. So if we give him consistent stuff, they build off that, and it's worked really well. Yeah.
So what is that next step? GIFI is used. Now it's going into the geomechanics realm. So how is it being applied there? Once we know the model is good, it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think of it in terms of the sort of overall workflow. So if you think of geomechanics right in the center, then the inputs to that are going to be VPVS density, which you get from these guys, whether it's well-based or whether it's an inversion. And then from that, you need to understand what the stresses are, the pore pressures are in that case, or vertical stress. Feed that into one of his models, basically, whether it's 1D or not. And then one of, I would say, one of the powers of this is playing the games of the what-if scenarios.
Yeah.
What happens if the rock is slightly different? So maybe the out of our fasces-based inversion, maybe it's a different probability of sand and shale, or different type of, maybe it's those carbonates, etc. And then you can start playing those games to say, okay, how does that actually impact what the stresses actually are within a wellbore, or in this case within a 3D volume.
Right.
And sort of to give you guys a bit of a hard time, when you started in your introduction, you sort of focused on the production side, and flattening out the production curves, all that kind of getting your stimulation right. But the other half is the cost side. And also the OH&S side. So you got to make sure, can I put this well in the ground safely? Can I actually, is it going to cost me much? Am I going to have wellbore stability issues? Am I going to have stimulation problems? Am I going to have induced seismicity? There are a whole lot of geomechanical problems that once you understand that property model, you can start thinking about how's this thing actually going to behave from a variety of different fronts. And obviously the production is very important, but also that cost side, keeping the well cost down and also making sure it's being drilled safely. On Alex's side, I mean, one of the things we've been working on is identifying pore pressure variations, and that was driven by the fact that some operators are having kicks. And you don't want to have well control events. That's dangerous and it's expensive. And if you can actually understand that much better ahead of the bit with the seismic, because you've got a good inversion, good seismic data, right? That's a real value add and a real safety hit.
I mean, especially in the unconventional front, right? Because we're not talking about drilling a single well. We're talking about developing an entire field. We have 10, 12, some companies up to 30 rigs out there, right? If we can do these field-sized, and figuring out, where are pockets of where we have these high pore pressure, and just all of a sudden now we can de-risk these areas. Maybe not condemn them, right? But understand, okay, let's just be careful when we approach these areas.
Well, because if you know you've got it,
yeah,
different well design, different casing design, different mud system, right? You can still do it.
Right.
You just got to know it's there in advance.
Right.
Then you can actually work out how to do it.
Yep.
Then you're off.
When we first brought it out, we definitely saw people kind of not doing the pre-drill characterization. They were charging ahead, piloting an area. And we're saying, hey, with a few wells, you can actually characterize this whole area and then pick where you want to do your pilot and get the information you want, rather than after the fact saying, hey, I got to explain all these results, Yeah. And so that, I think, you could see the light go on when we first gave some presentations on this, like at ERTEC a couple of years ago. And that's kind of snowballed a little bit here now.
Well, you think in terms of MPV, what's driving everybody. And suddenly, if you actually know they're going to develop it, a lot of these players are going to develop it. They've got a plan. There's going to be a certain number of wells. That's just going to happen. But if you can actually understand what your rock properties are and how it's going to behave, then you can high grade your wells. You can start understanding your tier 1 asset better. And so if you can actually develop your better assets first, suddenly you bring a lot of revenue forward. Completely changes your MPV.
It's a fantastic approach, and one that's absolutely needed. And I like the fact that you said the lights seem to get turned on after a couple of years, and now they're actually doing this. And that's a huge aspect of what we do as geoscientists that I didn't really think about. I'm always talking about and harping on people on, we got to get recovery factors up, we got to flatten out the decline curves. But you're bringing up a very good point. You could drill safer, drill faster, drill more efficient, save a lot of money, save a lot of danger.
Do the science. That's
science.
Essentially do the science. De-risk every part of this the best you can
Right.
before you start to
And
develop.
there's a very real time clock in every one of these operators' rooms that they're up against, and you guys are also providing those solutions. As listen, you don't have the data management to get to those answers fast enough. We also provide iPoint. We also provide these other solutions that we can now give that data to us, allow us to manage, allow us to make these decisions, or at least paint that picture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things we're seeing is with a lot of smaller companies, that are actually exploiting these unconventionals. And when you have a geophysicist in these things, you're doing so much day to day, right? You've got to follow the rig, you've got to do the drilling,
Right.
and you need the inversions. And so really, I think it came along with iPoint. We're like, we need to be supporting these guys and make them effective. And how do you do that? And that's sort of trying to engineer better software, trying to get them organized with their own data, which is scattered in many different
Right.
places.
I was going
Well,
with
yeah.
standardizing.
Yeah.
If you guys could come up with a way to internally standardize the data,
Yeah.
and now operators are coming to you guys and saying, what are these rules you have right inside these databases that allow me to find those mistakes, these inconsistencies, these fat-fingered data points and things like that?
Yeah.
That would be a fascinating way to do that.
Yeah, I think so. And we've just seen a reduction in the workforce, and so you're trying to make them more capable. And at the end of the day, they have to hand something to their engineers and say, and the engineer to come back and say, I want that again. Like every time I do that, then I'm getting good results.
Yeah.
And so that's the mission, I think, right now.
And going back to the time frame thing, I mean, one of the big issues, you got to deliver something in a time frame, and so time frame is critical. A lot of these guys, they're going ahead with their developments, trying to catch up with the bit is quite difficult. And you mentioned about being scientific. One of the things you got to be careful of as a bunch of science trained people, what we tend to want to do is we want to find the best solution we can, or the most accurate solution. That isn't necessarily the way to add value, right? There's a certain level of accuracy or precision you need to actually make the decision. As soon as you're putting more into it than that, you're actually spending extra resource and extra time for no added value.
Right.
And so actually talking to your
Exactly.
customers and really understanding what it is they want to do and their time
Right.
frames and what they really need to solve the problem is critical to actually delivering
Man.
that solution.
So you're saying don't put too much detail in. Like, are you trying to get out of doing your timesheets right now? Is this what this is all about? Is that what's going on, Jerry?
It's
when have I-
it's
when have I ever-
Friday.
Musketeers.
When have I ever done a
Yeah.
timesheet? I'm always in trouble for not doing my timesheets. I don't do them. Sorry, Gabby.
We understand that for sure. End of the month, like, gosh.
You're
Answer this
diving
time.
through the emails. What did I do that day?
Ugh, with a side of ugh. Okay, let's put you up against the wall a little bit. I agree. You guys are more than capable of allowing us to drill safely, faster, save us on CapEx, all that stuff. I absolutely believe that. However, we are doing a terrible job in this industry, in the unconventionals, and specifically in the Permian Basin as an example, of getting recovery factors above a reasonable expectation. We should not be expecting only a 5% recovery factors. You guys are highly academic. You guys have an unbelievable academic career. Was a 5% ever accepted as a result of a test or a project? No, absolutely not. So it should not be accepted today. We are failing in this industry is the reality, and we must have a step change, and it has to happen now. We cannot wait. This is the window of time. How do we do it?
Well, I think there's a strong realization now that it's although I don't like the word, it's this idea of integration. Bear
Right.
in mind, there was a lot of data, whether it was onshore or offshore. I spent most of my time offshore, deep water drilling, and you're dealing with assets that are individual disciplines. So your geophysicist does his own little bit. The geomechanicist does his own little bit.
right.
And it's only now that we're seeing, the reality of putting all the data together and then seeing what happens. And I think that is what's coming into fruition. So I do believe that will improve, but probably only on the next few years. We've all had the excuse of, let's say the last 5 years of trying to bring it together.
You're right.
Now it's okay. Let's do something now.
here.
We're
We're
here.
here.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Well, and I think the follow-up to that is, in terms of production, right, what controls your production? It's where the frac goes and what rock the frac intersects, right? So you have to understand your rock properties, and what controls where the frac goes? Your rock properties and your stress, right? That's what drives where the frac goes. and then the production is driven. Is that rock that frac intersects, is that good production? Is that good producing rock, or is it not?
Right.
And so you can have small changes in geology that mean a big change in frac behaviour.
Massive,
and so you're looking at you're going, am I getting such different production from like quite similar rock? Because I got a small change, which means my frac goes somewhere else, and it's not intersecting the optimal rock. So if we can understand that better, and we can design our fracs better, then suddenly your production follows.
So what are your thoughts on this parent-child, sticking with unconventionals, this parent-child relationship, right? From the geomechanics experts across the table, Three Musketeers, the dream team, right? So what is actually happening in the subsurface? What is going on with that stress field? Why is it changing so much, and why?
So that bit is actually the fundamentals and the principles of that is really simple. The actual mechanics of how to understand it and work around it is really complicated. Yeah. So basically,
keep it simple. Just for me. Just for me. I mean, for the audience. Yeah.
So where does a frac go? A frac goes to where your lowest stress is. Where it's easiest to break the rock, that's where the frac goes. What happens when you produce out a rock? You lower the pore pressure and you reduce the stresses. So where you've already depleted, where a frac's already been, and where you've got depleted rocks, the stresses are lower. So when you go back to frac it again or frac near it, the frac is going to go for the weakest and the lowest stress rock. So that's why it goes straight for that previous well, and that's why people have tried all sorts of things like pressure reinjection, etc. And to try and stop that frac going back to that low stress environment, but it's quite hard.
Right.
And so really you want to make sure you get your frac design right up front. You want to understand what you're doing. Right. Because, like I said, fundamentally it's quite simple, but actually then modelling that is actually pretty difficult.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's set up a visual right now, and I want to take you guys into this reservoir we just found. It's this building. It's the size of this building, and it's as long as this building. It's a black shale. It's an unconventional rock. We landed over here. We built the curve. We're drilling a 6.5-inch hole through this building, going this way, perpendicular to maximum horizontal stress. And now we have to put a frac away in this thing. I would argue that the industry has gone from creating huge fracs, one plane, big wing fracs.
These huge bi-wing fracs.
Yeah, highways. They go to that wall, they go to this wall, and they're just one big frac that's going out that way. And maybe it goes up and it's controlled by maybe some carbonates or whatever that frac barrier is above and below. But really all we had were some big fracs that went away from the perfs every 120 feet for the length of this building. Now the industry seems to be saying that's bad. That's conventional stuff. If you have the porosity and permeability relationship, the K-Phi relationship, you got to have porosity and it has to be connected. We don't need those big fracs that are hooking up this room. We need to now focus near wellbore. We want to stay in this section of this, say it's in fourths. We want to stay in this fourth of the section. Complexity around the wellbore. We want to cut and break as much new crystal face of the rock as possible, and then get that to drain back to our wellbore that is this big through this room and get it back to surface. How do we do that? How is that done?
Well, I'm going to be a bit, say the stuff I shouldn't say, but
not you doing.
Never.
We expect.
What's very difficult to do is fight geology. So if you've got, for example, that we've got in lots of areas, highly anisotropic stress, you're going to get a bi-wing fracture. And if you try not to get a bi-wing fracture, you're fighting geology. It's going to be quite hard. So what you could do is like lots more smaller clusters, smaller volume fracs, much closer together.
We're seeing that too.
Yep.
Or you can go larger fracs further out. Lots of different ways you can attack it. But if you say, what I want to get a more complex frac in this particular environment, if the rocks and the stress don't work with that, if you're trying to fight against geology, you're just asking for trouble, right? Work out what's going to work in your environment and chase that. Don't go, this is what I want, and I'm going to try and force it on my environment.
Wow, so
I love that answer.
Yeah.
I love that answer.
100%. Is that the end of the show? We're out of time?
Yeah.
Okay. So we just ran out of time with the Three Musketeers. Is there anything you guys want to finish and say maybe a last 30-second spiel of what
Jezza
you're
looks
excited
like
about?
Jezza's mouth was pretty open now that you wanted to...
Dr. Jezza.
We can obviously find you guys on Icon's website. Someone can reach out and say, I need these three men on my project to figure this out. They can find you there.
Yeah, everything's on the website.
Right on.
Absolutely. Look, thanks very much, guys. This
This
has been really,
awesome.
really good
Yeah.
conversation.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Longer setting.
Yeah.
More beers.
Yeah.
Good plan.
And we out.